When I was little, my mom would leave me alone with my big brothers. When she left, they would get out a secret Ouija board and play with it. They didn't let me join because I was too young. I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and they were much older, in their late teens. But I remember these times very clearly. So Mama left, and the boys went to a room near the kitchen where they kept the board hidden. They shut the door, and I stayed in the living room, watching TV alone. There was a small gap under the bedroom door, about 1.5 inches high, and sometimes I would quietly lie down and peek through that gap to watch them play. I remember one night, they talked to a spirit named Tobias. But every time they played after that, it was always Tobias they talked to. They talked to this spirit for about a week, but nothing strange happened. Then one night, while I watched, the board started talking about me. My brothers always wrote down what they heard and read it out loud. That made it easy for me to listen in. As I lay on the kitchen floor peeking under the door, the game got going, and my brothers began writing. I saw both of them look at each other, looking puzzled. My big brother said, "It says we are being watched." They looked around the room, and I quietly went back to watching TV. They opened the door to check on me, then went back into the room. I sneaked back over to watch them again. This time, the board mentioned my name. I remember my brother saying, "It says Bianca needs to go away." I felt really scared, and I could feel my face go pale. I knew my brothers didn't see me watching them. So I got up and pretended to be sleeping on the couch. Eventually, I actually fell asleep there. In the middle of the night, I woke up to a strange noise. It sounded like a cat growling angrily. I sat up and rubbed my eyes to wake up. After sitting there in the dark for a moment, the house seemed to become quiet. I was about to get up and go to the bathroom, but I couldn't seem to stand up. It felt like something was pushing down on my shoulders. Then all of a sudden, it felt like I was being pulled into a strong wind. I remember Mama's thin curtains were swirling around, and it felt like they were filling up the whole room. I felt really dizzy, and then suddenly everything stopped. I don't remember falling asleep, but when I woke up, I was still on the couch and it was morning outside. I've never told anyone about this before, but that's not the end of the story. My brothers kept playing with the board, but I didn't want to be near it anymore. Weird things started happening to them. They talked about it with each other, and I acted like I didn't know anything. One night, my brothers came out of the bedroom with a rolled-up sheet and scissors. They said they'd be back soon and went out the door. The next morning, I found out that the board had said scary things that really scared them. They took it to the old iron bridge down the road from our house to cut it up and throw it into the water. We were all in the kitchen eating breakfast when we heard a big crash outside. We rushed outside and saw a car had crashed on the bridge. My brothers were convinced it was because of the Ouija spirit they thought they had gotten rid of the night before. The person who crashed happened to be someone my brother knew from school. He told my brother that he crashed because as he was driving over the bridge, a demon-like figure appeared next to him in the car. Later, he found a piece of the board in his car and no one knows how it got there. When I was in high school, something strange happened to me. I was at my friend's house, which was in a big building with many homes inside. My friend had a neighbor who lived upstairs. She was younger than us, but we liked spending time with her when I visited my friend. One day, this neighbor told us she had a special game called a Ouija board and asked if we wanted to play with her. We both said yes, because I didn't really believe Ouija boards were real. I thought they were just stories people made up. We went to a garage in the building and put our fingers on a small piece called the planchette. At first, nothing happened for a long time. Then, the planchette moved, and we started asking questions to a spirit that was supposed to be there. I can't remember who asked, but someone wanted to know if the spirit was trying to talk to anyone specific. Surprisingly, it spelled out my name. I wasn't sure if it was real or just my friends playing a joke. So I asked the spirit what its name was. Then, it spelled out my grandmother's name. She had passed away 6 months before we used the Ouija board. So I began feeling uneasy because my grandmother's name is in a different language, and my friends didn't know that language. I never told them her name or how to spell it. So, it was strange when the Ouija board spelled out her name. I asked what my grandmother wanted, and the board spelled out, you. Then, the planchette started moving in strange circles and went off the board without spelling anything that made sense. I asked for more explanation, and then it just spelled out, "You are great. Remember this." Anyway, at that moment, I thought maybe one of us was moving the board strangely, so I said goodbye. A few days later, my grandfather, who was my grandmother's husband, passed away suddenly. It was a surprise because he was very healthy. It happened right before Christmas, and he was really looking forward to it. While I was at my grandfather's funeral, I thought about the Ouija board. Suddenly, it clicked in my mind. When my grandmother tried to spell something starting with U, I remembered that grandfather starts with those letters. But then, the planchette moved strangely when my grandmother couldn't finish spelling the word. It felt like something was blocking her from completing it and trying to warn me. The following months were really tough for me. I started blaming myself and thought I caused my grandfather's death by using the Ouija board. What scared me the most was that these thoughts didn't feel like my own. I can't really explain it. Maybe it was just guilt making me feel this way. But after using the board, I always felt like something was watching me. I sensed a strange presence for a few months afterward. But I still had doubts. Was the spirit really my grandmother? And were the dark thoughts and presence just in my head? When I was in college, I spent 1 month staying at a big hunting place in the middle of nowhere in Idaho. The closest town was 22 miles away. It was June 1987. The place belonged to my girlfriend's parents. But I won't say the name of the town that was 22 miles away, as my girlfriend's parents might still own it, and I don't want things to get weirder. The place was really big with lots of land. The person who usually took care of it full-time had just quit. My girlfriend's dad went there to find a new caretaker, but the new one couldn't start for a month. So her dad offered to pay me $1,000 to go out there. He said I'd get free food, satellite TV, and free drinks. All I had to do was watch over the place and take care of the dogs and the horse. It sounded better than working landscaping. I spent my time reading, exploring, playing with the dogs, riding the horses, and shooting. Nothing much happened during my time there until one night, when I suddenly heard knocking at the front door. I didn't panic much because I had 2 German shepherds with me inside. There were some neighbors a few miles away. I thought maybe someone had just driven up. In the middle of the night, I woke up to loud knocking on the front door and the dogs barking like crazy. I wasn't going to answer it. I just stayed quiet upstairs. The next morning, very early, I opened the front door to let the dogs out and saw a white Chevy Nova parked in the driveway near the small cabin where the caretaker stayed. The cabin was about 100 yards from the main house. I called my girlfriend's dad and asked if he knew anyone with that kind of car, and I also told him about what happened the night before. He didn't know anyone, so he called the police right away. The police came and asked me some questions. They walked around the property for about an hour. The car was locked, and the police had it towed away. I don't know if it was broken down or not. There was only one set of tire tracks leading to the house. Then a few days later, my girlfriend's dad called me and said the owner of the car was missing. He told me to call the police if anything strange happened again. I didn't know the guy at all. I don't know how long he'd been missing, or when he was reported missing, or who reported it. He was just gone. Then after a month, I went back home, and my girlfriend and I broke up soon after. So, I never found out what really happened with that guy. Let me tell you about something strange that happened to me. I know it's hard to explain, but I'll try my best. This happened more than a year ago, but my friend convinced me to share it with others. Maybe someone can help me understand it. So far, only my friend and my wife know about this. I really want to understand what happened, but it's not easy to talk about. Let me give you some background info before you ask why I was alone in Death Valley. I have 2 jobs. I'm in the army and I love adventures. So I like being outdoors to relax and clear my mind. But I'm not naturally good at leading because I'm an introvert. So being around lots of people is hard for me. Leading a group, motivating them, and being charismatic is even harder. That's why I escape whenever I can. I go to beautiful, quiet places where I can relax inside, even if it means I have to work hard to get there. For me, it's like recharging my batteries. If you're really introverted like me, you'll understand what I mean. So, in the summer of 2015, I had just come back from Africa, where I had to work. I was exhausted. I needed a break. So I decided to plan a trip through Death Valley. I would ride my dirt bike, which is allowed on the streets, for 1,500 miles over several days. I chose to go during the hottest time of the year, because I knew it would be the quietest and most peaceful place I could find. I mentioned earlier that I see adventuring as a profession of mine. That's because I've spent a lot of time doing it, exploring, escaping, and having adventures. I'm really good at it. Out in the desert, I've seen some strange, scary, and really awesome things, especially there. There are scavenger animals that follow you for miles, hoping you'll keel over so they can eat you. I've found caves that look like people made them, even though they're hundreds of miles from anywhere. And there are traps set up to stop vehicles or people from moving. Out in Death Valley, I saw a lot of old military gear and other things. You see a bunch of stuff when you're out there. Usually, it all fits together and makes sense. But on this trip, in Death Valley, I saw something that didn't make any sense at all. I had been riding all day through the valley. It was super hot, and there weren't many people around that day. Actually, I hadn't seen anyone for about half of that day since I started heading toward Ouija crater, but when I got there, I did see one couple in a Mustang car just leaving Ouija crater. That was the only other people I saw. It's not surprising though, because of how hot it was and because of how remote it is. After that, I went towards Racetrack Playa and stopped somewhere between Ouija crater and Racetrack Playa for the night. I turned off my phone and plugged it in to charge too. I left everything by my bike, which was just off the road. Then I set up my sleeping bag a little ways from the bike and the trail. I didn't think anyone would come by, but it was just part of my plan in case someone unexpected showed up. My bike was bright red, so it would easily catch anyone's eye, but my sleeping bag was camouflaged, so nobody would notice it. That way, if any bad guys showed up, I'd have some time to figure out what to do. I climbed into my sleeping bag, bringing only my camelback, folding knife, and red light tactical flashlight. Everything else was back at the bike. It was really peaceful. It was so quiet out there, and warm too. I felt really safe, and it was easy to fall asleep. But when you're alone, you never sleep very deeply. Your mind stays alert, so even small noises can wake you up. That night, though, there was nothing to wake me. It was nice, until about 2 a.m. That's when it happened. I woke up to the sounds of children. Can you believe it? Children, out here in the middle of nowhere. I was tucked inside my sleeping bag, so at first, I just lay there, trying to figure out what I was hearing. But the voices kept going. I heard children's voices, clear as day. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but it sounded like they were about 50 meters away. I called out, "Hello?" while still in my sleeping bag. The voices stopped for a moment, then started again. Now I was sure there had to be kids out there. So I sat up and peeked out of my sleeping bag, then turned on my flashlight. I aimed it toward where I heard the noises, away from the trail where my bike was parked, and there, about 50 to 75 meters away, were two kids. They looked like they were wandering around, seeming lost and sounding lost, in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't understand what they were talking about, but they sounded like they were trying to figure out what to do or where to go. I called out again, louder this time. They were facing my direction, but not directly at me. Even though I was shining a bright flashlight on them, they didn't shield their eyes like they should have. Instead, they just looked around, as if they were searching for me, but couldn't see me. They turned away and continued walking, and I just watched them, not sure what to do. Their voices and figures slowly faded away into the distance. I stayed there, feeling confused and not knowing what to think or do. It was all so strange. Eventually, I lay back down until it started raining around 5:30 a.m. That's when I packed up in the dark and kept going with my adventure as the morning came. So, that's what I saw. I saw kids in Death Valley, over 100 miles from anything. They were just walking, talking, and wandering, and then they disappeared. Strangely, it didn't scare me at the time. I was mostly just confused. That's why I couldn't figure out what to do in that moment. Now looking back, it's really scary.